Calciopoli, 2006. Italy had just lifted the World Cup in Berlin, but back home, their domestic game was in ruins. Wiretaps revealed Juventus executives directly influencing referee appointments, openly discussing which officials would favour their side. It wasn't just Juventus, AC Milan, Fiorentina and Lazio were also implicated in the tangled web of corruption. The punishment was historic. Juventus, Italy's most successful club, was stripped of 2 Serie A titles and sent down to Serie B. To put it in perspective, it was like Liverpool being relegated for cheating. The scandal shattered public trust in Italian football and exposed how deep the rot had spread. Even today, Serie A hasn't fully recovered from Calciopoli's stain. Every refereeing decision is viewed with suspicion, every appointment questioned. The league's reputation remains haunted by the moment its biggest club was caught buying victories that everyone already suspected weren't earned. Qatar World Cup 2022. Billions were spent transforming desert sands into air-conditioned stadiums. Yet behind the glittering spectacle lay grim statistics. Thousands of migrant workers from South Asia died during the tournament's build-up, often in searing heat, their deaths masked by vague entries of cardiac arrest or natural causes. Human rights groups called it a World Cup built on graves. The event was tainted long before kick-off with leaked emails suggesting backroom deals and suspicious voting blocks. FIFA's own chief ethics investigator eventually resigned, claiming his report on misconduct had been deliberately buried. On the pitch, the football delivered unforgettable moments, none greater than Lionel Messi finally lifting the trophy. But every goal carried a shadow, a reminder of exploitation, abuse, and the staggering human cost of football's global ambitions that broadcasters were all too happy to gloss over. Hillsborough disaster. This was more than a scandal. Hillsborough represents one of the darkest chapters in British sporting history, not only for the disaster itself, but for the decades-long cover-up that followed. 97 Liverpool fans lost their lives in a catastrophic crush at Hillsborough Stadium. For years, police and large sections of the media deflected blame onto the victims, painting them as drunk, disorderly hooligans who brought tragedy upon themselves. The truth, uncovered much later, was devastating. Police mismanagement, inadequate stadium design, and catastrophic crowd control failures caused the disaster. Families fought for 30 years before an inquest finally ruled the fans had been unlawfully killed. The outrage lay not just in the tragedy, but in the decades of lies, blame, and silence that followed. Wounds that cut as deep as the disaster itself. Today, Liverpool's kit carries the number 97 between 2 eternal flames, a permanent reminder of the lives lost and of a fight for truth and justice that can never be forgotten. Benzema blackmail scandal. In 2015, French football was rocked when Karim Benzema was implicated in the blackmail of his teammate Mathieu Valbuena over a sex tape. The case dragged on for years, and in 2021, Benzema was convicted for his role. The fallout was anything but equal. Valbuena's international career ended abruptly. He never played for France again. Benzema, meanwhile, went on to win the Ballon d'Or and cement his legacy at Real Madrid, seemingly untouched by the scandal. Media coverage only deepened the divide. In France, the seriousness of the case was downplayed. Abroad, broadcasters focused almost exclusively on Benzema's goals rather than his conviction. The result was a chilling message. In football, extraordinary talent can shield you from extraordinary wrongdoing. And in the end, the scandal said less about Benzema himself than it did about a sport willing to forgive almost anything, so long as the goals keep coming. Murder of Andres Escobar. At the 1994 World Cup, Colombian defender Andres Escobar accidentally turned the ball into his own net against the United States. 10 days later, he was shot dead outside a nightclub in Medellin. The killing was tied to Colombia's drug cartels and betting syndicates, who had lost huge sums on the national team's shock early exit. Witnesses said his killer mocked him by shouting goal with each of the 12 bullets fired. Colombia had entered the tournament as dark horses, with criminal groups staking fortunes on their success. Escobar, a calm, respected figure known as the gentleman of football, paid with his life for a single mistake on the pitch. His murder exposed football's lethal entanglement with organised crime, a truth the global game still struggles to confront. Yet in Colombia, Escobar is remembered not for his own goal, but as a symbol of dignity and peace, a reminder of the values football should stand for. Nigeria's age fraud. In 2016, routine bone scan tests uncovered 26 overage players in Nigeria's youth setup. It wasn't a one-off. The deception had been embedded for years. Adult players were passed off as teenagers, competing against genuine youngsters on the international stage. Nigeria's much-celebrated dominance at youth level suddenly looked tainted. Birth certificates were doctored, ages shaved down, and real teenage prospects sidelined by older imposters. The advantage was immense and completely against the rules. The investigation exposed what many insiders already knew. Age fraud was rampant across African youth football. But Nigeria's case stood out as the most thoroughly documented, laying bare a culture of institutionalized cheating. FIFA's response, however, was limp. A few suspensions, a few fines, punishments so light they barely scratched the surface. The message was unmistakable. As long as trophies kept coming, the game would look the other way. Luis Suarez versus Patrice Evra. In 2011, the Premier League was shaken by a racism scandal between Luis Suarez and Patrice Evra. After an investigation, Suarez was found guilty of racially abusing Evra and banned for 8 games and a £40,000 fine. Liverpool's handling of the incident only amplified the outrage. The club organised a public show of support, with teammates wearing shirts backing Suarez before a match. When Suarez and Evra next faced each other, Suarez pointedly refused a handshake, an act seen live around the world. For many, the image of Liverpool players lining up behind a guilty verdict symbolised football's failure to confront racism. The scandal dominated headlines for months, damaging Liverpool's reputation off the pitch and leaving a lasting stain on how the club was perceived. Even years later, the incident is remembered as a turning point in English football's struggle to deal with racism honestly and decisively. The 1978 World Cup. The 1978 World Cup unfolded under the iron grip of Argentina's military junta. While the stadiums roared with celebration, tens of thousands of citizens were being disappeared, tortured, or killed by the regime, with detention centres operating within walking distance of matches. The tournament's integrity has long been questioned. Argentina's crucial 6-0 demolition of Peru, which secured their place in the final, has been dogged by allegations of political interference. Several Peruvian players later spoke of threats, intimidation, and circumstances that made the game anything but normal. Argentina did lift the trophy on home soil, but the triumph was tainted from the start. The regime used football to polish its global image, and the world's media largely played along and celebrated the spectacle while ignoring the atrocities happening just beyond the stadium walls. Disgrace of Gijon. West Germany versus Austria produced one of football's most shameful spectacles. Algeria had shocked the world by beating West Germany, and if the Germans won by a narrow margin, both European teams would progress at Algeria's expense. Germany scored early, then for the next 80 minutes, both sides passed the ball aimlessly, avoided tackles, and killed the clock, while furious fans showered the pitch with boos. Commentators openly called the match a scandal as it unfolded, while disgusted spectators waved handkerchiefs in protest, and some even turned their backs on the game. Algeria, who had played bravely and beaten both West Germany and Chile, were eliminated despite their heroics. The match went down in history, not as a contest, but as a conspiracy played out in front of the world. The outrage forced FIFA's hand. From that moment on, all final group stage games have been scheduled to kick off simultaneously, a rule change born directly from the disgrace in Gijon. FIFA corruption. The FBI doesn't typically concern itself with football governance until 2015, when agents stormed a luxury Zurich hotel and arrested top FIFA officials on racketeering charges that read like organised crime indictments. The investigation uncovered a vast web of corruption, millions in bribes and kickbacks tied to World Cup hosting rights, television deals, and sponsorship contracts. FIFA wasn't behaving like a sporting body. It was operating as a global cartel, hiding behind the facade of football administration. The fallout was seismic. Sepp Blatter, FIFA's long-serving president, was banned from the game for 6 years. Powerful executives were led away in handcuffs. Major sponsors fled, eager to distance themselves from a brand now synonymous with corruption. For decades, FIFA had seemed untouchable. But in one morning raid, the myth of its immunity collapsed, and with it came the first real push for transparency and reform in the most powerful organization in world sport. Maradona's failed drug tests. The world's broadcasters have broadcast Maradona's wonder goal against England thousands of times. What they rarely highlight are the drug scandals that clouded his later career. In 1991, while playing for Napoli, Maradona tested positive for cocaine and was handed a 15-month ban, a stunning fall for a man who had carried Argentina to glory just 5 years earlier. At the 1994 World Cup in the United States, he failed another test, this time for ephedrine, a banned stimulant. His tournament ended overnight. The enduring image was of Maradona leaving the pitch with bulging eyes and a manic stare, flanked by medical staff, a surreal moment that symbolized the end of his World Cup career. These scandals were never hidden. They were global news at the time, yet in football's memory they are often pushed aside. For every hand of God or slaloming run through England's defence, there was a darker counterpoint: chemical dependency and a career repeatedly sabotaged by excess, a truth the sport prefers to forget, even as it endlessly replays his genius. Thomas Partey. Between 2022 and 2025, Arsenal midfielder Thomas Partey faced multiple allegations of sexual assault. The accusations were serious and repeated, yet the response from both his club and the wider football establishment was strikingly muted. While players like Mason Greenwood and Benjamin Mendy were suspended as soon as allegations surfaced, Partey's situation was handled very differently. Arsenal kept him in the squad, he remained a regular starter, and there was no official statement from the club addressing the claims. For years, major British outlets gave the story little attention, often relegating it to small columns or avoiding it entirely. The scandal raised uncomfortable questions. Does football apply accountability unevenly depending on a player's market value, position, or the politics of their club? Partey's case suggested that when it comes to off-field controversies, consistency is sacrificed, and protecting assets often outweighs principles. The match-fixing epidemic. From Italy to Turkey to South Korea, organised match-fixing has plagued football for decades. Criminal syndicates have manipulated betting markets by bribing referees, threatening players, and scripting results long before kick-off. The 2009 Bochum investigation revealed suspicious activity in more than 200 matches across 9 countries, involving millions in bribes and bets. 4 years later, Europol expanded the scale. Over 680 games worldwide were under suspicion, including 380 in Europe alone. More than 425 officials, players and criminals were implicated in what investigators called the biggest sporting scandal in history. The sums were staggering, at least £7 million paid in bribes, generating £14 million in illicit winnings. The sheer scale made it impossible to know which matches were authentic and which were staged. Sometimes the drama fans celebrated wasn't genuine competition at all. It was carefully scripted theatre disguised as sport. These scandals reveal football's darker truths that mainstream coverage often avoids. Power, money, and influence operate in football's shadows, creating a system where some get second chances while others are destroyed.